The millionaire boss's twins were deaf until the company's new black cleaning lady did something that changed everything. The silence on the 40th floor of Manning Corporation was almost eerie that Thursday afternoon when Patricia Williams entered the executive office carrying her cleaning supplies. She stopped immediately at the sight before her. Two identical 6-year-old girls with curly blonde hair and crystal blue eyes sat quietly in the corner, playing with dolls. They made no noise, did not speak, only moving their lips occasionally, as if whispering invisible secrets. "Don't worry about them," said Richard Manning, the billionaire CEO, without looking up from his documents. "Emma and Sophie have been deaf since birth, completely deaf. Just ignore them and do your job." Patricia, 32, never imagined that her first day as a cleaner in the technology company would confront her with something she knew intimately. Her younger brother had been born with partial hearing loss, and she had spent her entire adolescence learning sign language and communication techniques to help him. What intrigued her most was not the fact that the girls were deaf, but the subtle details her experience had trained her to notice. When she vacuumed near them, they turned their heads slightly toward the sound. When Richard tapped his pen on the table, Sophie frowned, as though something had disturbed her. "How long have they been like this?" Patricia asked casually, organizing her supplies. "Since birth," Richard replied, fatigue evident in his voice. "I've spent a fortune on the best specialists. Dr. Harrison, Dr. Mitchell, the entire Manhattan Hearing Institute team. They all confirmed it. Profound bilateral sensorineural deafness. They will never hear a word." Patricia continued watching discreetly as she cleaned. The girls played in a strangely coordinated rhythm, as if following music only they could perceive. When Richard raised his voice during a phone call, they tensed, despite having their backs to him. "Where's their mother?" Patricia asked softly. Richard's face darkened. "She died in a car accident when they were 2. It's just me and them now, and a team of specialized caregivers, of course." Patricia decided to test something. She deliberately dropped a coin behind the girls, far enough away that no floor vibration would give it away, but close enough to make a clear sound. Immediately, Emma turned her head in the exact direction of the noise. "Interesting," Patricia murmured. "What's interesting?" Richard asked sharply, finally looking at her. "Nothing, sir. Just admiring how beautiful they are," Patricia replied with a polite smile. For the next 2 hours, Patricia discreetly observed. The girls reacted subtly to specific sounds, grew uncomfortable with loud noises, and even seemed to communicate with each other using a unique system of signs, something Patricia had never seen in any sign language manual. As she finished cleaning, Patricia approached them and waved gently. They looked at her with wide, curious eyes. Slowly, Patricia signed "hello" in American Sign Language. The reaction was immediate. Emma and Sophie glanced at each other, then back at Patricia with expressions that mixed surprise and hope. Sophie hesitated, then began to form a sign, but stopped halfway, casting a nervous glance at her father. At that moment, Patricia realized something was deeply wrong. Children born completely deaf would not react that way to sound. More importantly, they would not hesitate to use signs unless someone had taught them to fear doing so. As she packed away her supplies, a certainty grew inside her. These girls were not completely deaf, and for some sinister reason, someone wanted them to continue believing they were. What Patricia didn't know was that her discovery would entangle her in a much darker scheme, one involving respected professionals who profited from keeping 2 innocent children trapped in a world of unnecessary silence. If you're enjoying this story of discovery and courage, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what this cleaning lady was about to uncover would not only change the lives of these girls, but also expose a web of lies no one could have imagined. The next morning, Patricia arrived at Manning Corporation an hour early, determined to observe the twins before Richard came in. What she discovered only deepened her suspicion. Emma and Sophie were playing in the corner with their caregiver, Helen, a strict 50-year-old woman who spoke to the girls using exaggerated, slow gestures, as though they were not only deaf, but mentally disabled. "Don't make a mess," Helen mouthed dramatically, her lips moving unnaturally slowly. "Daddy doesn't like it when you make noise." Patricia watched quietly, pretending to clean. The girls looked frustrated, trying to sign something to Helen, but the woman clearly didn't understand or perhaps chose to ignore them. Then, Patricia noticed something chilling. When Helen stepped out to take a phone call, Emma leaned close to Sophie and whispered. It wasn't exaggerated lip movement. It was a real whisper, faint but unmistakably vocalized. "My God," Patricia muttered under her breath, pretending to polish the nearby window. When Richard arrived later, his first action was to check that the girls were quiet and obedient. He didn't even glance at Patricia, only nodding at Helen for confirmation. "Patricia," he said coldly, without looking up from his documents, "be especially careful with the cleaning today. I have an important meeting with investors, and I can't have any unnecessary distractions." The word distractions was said with a brief glance toward his daughters, and Patricia felt her stomach churn. This man treated his own children not as little girls who needed love and attention, but as inconveniences to be managed. That afternoon, while Richard was in his meeting, Patricia decided to risk a more direct approach. She walked over to the twins, making sure Helen had already left for lunch, and made a simple gesture. "Can you hear me?" The reaction was instant and devastating. Both girls looked at each other in panic, then quickly glanced at the security, cameras fixed in the corners of the room. Emma shook her head vigorously and pressed her finger to her lips in the universal gesture for silence. At that moment, Patricia understood the horror of what she was witnessing. These children could hear. They were being deliberately silenced, forced to pretend they had a disability they did not have. "Why can't you talk?" Patricia whispered, pretending to clean the nearby table. Sophie, the braver of the two, discreetly pointed to a photograph on Richard's desk. It was a picture of him standing beside a man in a white coat, smiling and shaking hands in a doctor's office. Patricia froze. She recognized that face instantly. It was Dr. Marcus Harrison, the same doctor who had destroyed her brother Kevin's childhood. When Kevin was only 4 years old, Dr. Harrison had misdiagnosed him with total deafness. For 5 long years, Kevin lived believing he was completely deaf. He was treated with the wrong methods, kept isolated from other children, and robbed of a normal childhood until Patricia, at 16, begged her parents to seek a second opinion. The new specialist had discovered the truth. Kevin only had partial hearing loss, which could have been easily corrected with proper devices from the start. But by then, the damage was done. 5 years of psychological trauma and unnecessary isolation had left scars Kevin would never fully recover from. "Dr. Harrison," Patricia whispered, reading the golden nameplate in the photo frame. Emma gave the faintest nod, her eyes filling with tears. The confirmation sent a chill through Patricia's body. That afternoon, when Richard returned from his meeting, Patricia made a bold decision that would change everything. "Mr. Manning," she said, interrupting him as he scrolled through his emails, "I need to talk to you about your daughters." Richard looked up, his irritation obvious. "Patricia, I've already made it clear. Your job here is cleaning, not questioning the medical decisions of renowned experts." "Renowned experts like Dr. Harrison?" Patricia asked firmly, surprising. Even herself with the steel in her voice, Richard's expression shifted immediately. The casual mask dropped, replaced by something darker. Calculating. Defensive. "How do you know Dr. Harrison's name?" "Because he did the same thing to my brother 15 years ago. Kevin spent half his childhood believing he was deaf, when in reality, he only had mild hearing loss that could have been corrected." Richard rose slowly from his chair, his posture turning threatening. Are you implying that the best specialists in the country misdiagnosed my daughters? I'm saying your daughters aren't deaf, Mr. Manning. And from what I've seen today, you know it. The real question is, why do you want them to believe they are? The silence that followed was suffocating. Richard walked to the window, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. When he turned back, his face wore a mask of icy calm, but Patricia had already seen the flicker of panic in his eyes before he covered it. Patricia, you're clearly confused about your role here, he said coldly. Your theories are not only inappropriate but offensive. Focus on your work, or find another job. But Patricia knew. She had touched a nerve. Richard Manning was hiding something, and he would do anything to keep it buried. That night, as she stored away her cleaning supplies, Patricia knew she had crossed a line of no return. Emma and Sophie were prisoners of a medical lie, just as Kevin once had been. The difference was that this time Patricia wasn't a helpless teenager. She was a grown woman with knowledge, experience, and a fire inside her forged by years of watching someone she loved suffer needlessly. As she waited for the elevator, the image of Emma and Sophie's desperate eyes haunted her. They were begging for help, in the only way they could, through silent looks and discreet gestures no one else bothered to notice. What Patricia didn't yet know was that her confrontation with Richard had set off a chain of events that would expose a scheme far darker than she could have imagined. His cold dismissal wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of how far Richard Manning would go to protect his darkest secrets. In the 3 days that followed, the atmosphere at Manning Corporation shifted dramatically. Helen was suddenly gone, replaced by 2 new caregivers who alternated shifts and followed rigid protocols with the twins. Emma and Sophie were now kept in a separate room, far from Patricia's work area. When Patricia tried to greet them in the hallway, the girls immediately looked away, clearly instructed not to acknowledge her. Administrative changes, Richard explained coldly when Patricia asked. The girls need more specialized care. Your only responsibility remains cleaning. But Patricia wasn't easily intimidated. During her lunch break that day, she made a call that would change everything. She dialed her cousin Denise, a nurse, who had worked at the city's children's hospital for 15 years and who had connections in nearly every medical department in the region. Denise, I need a very important favor, Patricia said, her voice low over the phone. Can you get me information on a doctor named Dr. Marcus Harrison? It's for an emergency. Harrison? That name sounds familiar. Wait, are you talking about the guy who lost his medical license last year? Patricia's heart raced. Lost? His license? What do you mean, girl? It was a huge scandal. He falsified diagnoses of children with hearing impairments to charge wealthy families for expensive treatments. The investigation lasted months. Why do you want to know about him? Patricia quickly explained Emma and Sophie's situation, omitting only their names to protect the girls. Denise was silent for a long moment before replying. Patricia, if what you're telling me is true, these children are victims of a crime. Harrison may have lost his license, but the doctors who continue to follow his fraudulent diagnoses are still practicing. Can you help me prove it? Patricia asked desperately. More than that, Denise said. I know a speech therapist who specializes in child development, Dr. Jennifer Costa. She was one of the key witnesses in the case against Harrison. If you can get these girls to her, even for a few minutes, she can confirm whether they really have hearing loss or if they're being misled. That afternoon, Patricia returned to the office with renewed determination. She knew she had to find a way to prove that Emma and Sophie could hear, but she also had to be extremely careful not to put them at risk. While cleaning, she noticed Richard had left for a meeting, and the 2 new caregivers were busy organizing medications in the living room. It was the perfect opportunity. Patricia quietly entered the room where the girls were playing alone. When they saw her, their faces lit up instantly, but they quickly grew cautious again. "It's okay," Patricia whispered, making sure no one was listening. "I know you can hear me perfectly well." Emma and Sophie looked at each other, tears welling in their eyes. "Finally," Sophie nodded almost imperceptibly. "I need you to help me prove it," Patricia continued softly. "But first, I need to know, why are you pretending to be deaf?" Emma glanced at the door, then leaned close and whispered in Patricia's ear. "Daddy said that if we talk, he'll send us away, like he sent Mommy away." Patricia felt her blood run cold. "What do you mean? He sent your mom away?" Sophie's voice trembled as she spoke. "Mom didn't die in the accident. She tried to take us away because she found out we weren't deaf. Dad said she was sick in the head, and the doctors agreed." The revelation was like a punch to Patricia's stomach. Richard had admitted his own wife to a psychiatric institution just to keep his false diagnosis scheme alive. "Where is your mom now?" Patricia asked. "In the place for sick people," Emma whispered. "Dad said that if we tell anyone we can hear, we'll go there too." At that moment, Patricia understood the truly sinister extent of what she was facing. This wasn't just medical negligence or financial greed. Richard was using his own daughters as pawns in a much darker game. He had destroyed an entire family to protect his lies. "Listen carefully," Patricia said firmly but gently. "You're not going anywhere. I'm going to protect you, but I need your help. Can you be brave for a few days?" Both girls nodded, and for the first time in years, Patricia saw genuine hope in their eyes. That afternoon, she devised a plan with 3 goals: to prove the girls weren't deaf, to find out where their mother was, and to expose Richard and his accomplices. When Richard returned from his meeting, he found Patricia working as usual, unaware that she had just uncovered secrets capable of destroying his carefully constructed life. "Everything quiet here?" he asked the caregivers casually. "Yes, Mr. Manning. The girls have been very quiet as usual." Richard smiled with satisfaction, glancing briefly at Patricia, who continued cleaning the windows as if nothing had happened. What he didn't know was that Patricia had discreetly photographed medical documents from his desk, including a letter from a psychiatric hospital with the name Elena Manning on the letterhead. That night, Patricia called Denise again and told her everything she had discovered. Her cousin was shocked. "Patricia, this is much more serious than we imagined. If this woman was forcibly admitted based on a false diagnosis, we're talking about kidnapping, false imprisonment, and child abuse. You need professional help immediately. Do you know anyone who can help?" "I have a friend who's a social worker specializing in child abuse cases, Dr. Sandra Martinez. She works with the police on complex cases like this." "But Patricia, are you sure you want to get involved? This man seems extremely dangerous." Patricia thought of Emma and Sophie's tears, of their mother possibly being unjustly locked away for years, of her brother Kevin and all the others who had suffered at the hands of corrupt doctors like Dr. Harrison. "I'm already involved, Denise. These children need someone to fight for them." The next morning, Patricia arrived at work knowing she was about to start a war that would change everything. As she organized her cleaning supplies, she watched Richard talking on the phone, likely with one of the doctors helping sustain his scheme. She maintained her calm, professional demeanor, as if she were just an invisible cleaning lady doing her job. But anyone watching closely would have noticed it wasn't submission guiding her movements. It was determination, strategic, deliberate. The determination of someone about to rewrite that family's history and expose a network of corruption that had destroyed innocent lives for years. Friday, 10:00 a.m. Richard was in his monthly board meeting when Patricia finally put her plan into motion. She was not alone. Dr. Jennifer Costa and Dr. Sandra Martinez entered the Manning Corporation building, accompanied by two investigators from the Department of Child Services, all duly authorized by a court order that Patricia had helped obtain using the photographic evidence. "Mr. Manning," the secretary called into the conference room, her voice trembling. "There are people here who need to speak with you immediately. They say it's about your daughters." Richard, in the middle of a presentation on quarterly profits, waved her off. "Tell them I'm busy. Anything related to the girls can be handled by the nannies." "Sir," the secretary insisted, "they have official documents, and the cleaning lady, Patricia, is with them." Richard's blood ran cold. Patricia was supposed to be working on the floor below. How had she gotten involved with the authorities? When he entered his office, the scene that greeted him made him instantly realize his carefully constructed life was collapsing. Emma and Sophie were sitting comfortably, chatting loudly and clearly with Dr. Jennifer, while Patricia documented everything with her cell phone. "Daddy always said that if we talked, he'd send us to the place for sick people like Mommy," Sophie explained naturally to the speech therapist, but Aunt Patricia said that wasn't true. "And can you hear me perfectly?" Dr. Jennifer asked, covering her mouth so the girls couldn't lip read. "Yes, doctor. We've always been able to hear everything," Emma replied without hesitation. Richard stormed into the room, fists clenched. "What's going on here? Who authorized you to disturb my daughters?" Dr. Sandra Martinez stepped forward, holding up her official documentation. "Mr. Manning, I am a social worker specializing in child abuse cases. We have a warrant to investigate allegations of medical negligence and possible psychological coercion." "That's absurd," Richard snapped. "My daughters are deaf." "I have medical reports from dozens of specialists, including Dr. Marcus Harrison, who lost his medical license last year for falsifying diagnoses," Patricia cut in, her voice firm and controlled. "The same reports I photographed from your office, showing glaring inconsistencies between the initial exams and the final diagnosis." Richard's face paled. You photographed private documents? Documents that prove your daughters were deliberately kept in psychological captivity," Dr. Sandra continued sharply. "And we also found interesting hospital records about Elena Manning, your wife." As if the situation wasn't devastating enough, the office door opened again. Elena Manning entered, accompanied by a lawyer and a nurse. After 4 years of forced confinement in a psychiatric clinic, she was finally free, thanks to the evidence Patricia had provided. "Mommy!" Emma and Sophie cried in unison, running into her arms. "You're back! You're really back!" Elena knelt down, tears streaming as she hugged them. "Mommy never gave up on you, my princesses. And now this whole lie is over." Richard froze, watching his family reunite as his world crumbled. "Elena, you're sick. The doctors confirmed you had psychotic episodes." "The same doctors you paid to keep our daughters trapped in a lie," Elena shot back, standing tall to face him for the first time in years. "I discovered the truth about Dr. Harrison's scheme when the girls were 2 years old. I found out you were receiving money from the clinic to maintain a false diagnosis. When I tried to expose you, you used your contacts to have me committed." Patricia stepped forward, holding her phone. "This entire conversation is being recorded and broadcast live to the proper authorities, including your confession that you knew about Dr. Harrison's scheme." Richard's voice cracked. "You don't understand. I needed the insurance money. The company was struggling. And you used your own daughters as a source of income, keeping them prisoners of a disability they never had," Dr. Sandra cut in, taking notes. "Mr. Manning, you are being formally charged with insurance fraud, child abuse, forced psychiatric hospitalization, and criminal conspiracy." As the investigators documented everything, Patricia watched Emma and Sophie laugh and chatter with their mother, free, happy, and alive for the first time in years. The transformation was extraordinary, from silent, fearful children to vibrant, communicative little girls in a matter of minutes. Richard tried one last, desperate move. "Patricia, you're just a cleaning lady. No one will believe your word. Over mine? Patricia gave him a calm, confident smile. It's not my word, Mr. Manning. It's the recordings of your daughters confirming everything. It's the contradictory medical reports from your office. It's the bank records showing your payments from Dr. Harrison's clinic. And it's Elena's testimony about how you had her committed to protect your scheme. Any competent professional would have seen the truth in minutes. She has been the victim of one of the cruelest forms of psychological abuse I've ever documented. Daddy. Sophie finally approached him, no longer afraid. Why did you make us believe we couldn't? Here? Why did you send Mommy away? Richard couldn't answer. For the first time in years, he was speechless, forced to face the devastating consequences of his selfish choices. As he was escorted out of his own building, he heard Elena laughing with her daughters, already making plans to recover the years they had lost. Emma and Sophie's crystal-clear voices echoed through the hallways, sounds he had deliberately silenced for years. Patricia gathered her cleaning supplies for the last time, but now she was no longer an invisible cleaning lady. She was a brave woman who had restored a family and exposed a criminal network that had destroyed innocent lives for pure profit. But what no one could have predicted was how this victory for justice would spread far beyond that courtroom, creating ripples that would not only transform the lives of Elena, Emma, and Sophie, but also inspire systemic changes that would protect thousands of other vulnerable families across the country. 6 months later, Patricia Williams sat in the country's most famous television studio, being interviewed about the case that had transformed child protection laws nationwide. Her book, The Silence That Screams, had become a bestseller, and she now ran a foundation dedicated to investigating suspected cases of fraudulent medical diagnoses. Richard Manning was serving a 12-year sentence for multiple federal crimes. His company had gone bankrupt after the scandal, and he had permanently lost custody of his daughters. The latest reports described him as a broken man who spent his days in prison obsessively repeating, "I just wanted to protect my money." Emma and Sophie, now 7 years old, attended a regular school where they were recognized as bright, articulate, and communicative students. Elena had fully recovered from her years of forced hospitalization and was now working as a lawyer specializing in child abuse cases, using her experience to help other families. Dr. Harrison and 5 of his colleagues faced criminal charges in 17 states. The investigation revealed more than 200 families affected by their scheme, resulting in millions of dollars in compensation and sweeping reforms in pediatric medical protocols. During the interview, when asked how a simple cleaning lady had managed to bring down such a powerful and complex scheme, Patricia smiled. "It wasn't me who brought anything down. It was Emma and Sophie who showed me that sometimes the greatest courage lies in breaking the silence others try to impose on us." The story of Patricia proved that true revenge is not destroying those who harm us, but building something greater than they could ever imagine. Richard had tried to use 2 innocent children as a source of profit, but instead, he laid the groundwork for a revolution that protected thousands of other vulnerable families. If this story of courage touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. Have you ever witnessed an injustice that no one wanted to see? Your voice could be the next one to break a dangerous silence.